Yes, everyone, you know what time it is. It's your boy Jack here, joined by Mia from Spurs Between the Lines, and we're going to give our sort of reaction here to Harry Kane's quotes, whether he called us out or not, whether he's being too honest. Is there such a thing as being too honest? I think that's what I'm going to have kind of a bit of a discussion on. And also, could he be a slight hypocrite also, too, right? In some of the things that he might have brought up, who's really responsible for some of the mentality questions and all those sort of good things. So we're going to break down quote by quote, and we're going to go through it here and just have sort of good chit chat and maybe a bit of a discussion on this. And Mia, thank you for joining me on this one. And I'm sure you've had maybe your own sort of thoughts already on your own channel on Spurs Between the Lines on this Kane situation. But let's get straight into it and see what he had to say sort of in this first quote. And it's the one that I kind of want to talk about, at least at length here. If you could do us a favor here, everybody, smash that like button for us. Get those comments in down below on your opinions on Kane's quotes here. And he says, this is the first one at least, he says it's a different pressure to what I felt at Spurs. Of course, we wanted to win things, but if you went a couple of games without winning, it wasn't exactly a disaster. The feeling at Bayern is that you have to win every game. Now, when he kind of speaks to that feeling that there wasn't really a lot of pressure, that there wasn't really a disaster, Mia, I feel like, right, he's alluding that that's coming from somewhere, right? There's some sort of feeling that there's no pressure on the players when things go wrong. I feel like there's three places, right, where that could come from. That could come from the fan base, comes from the board, the owners, and it also comes, I think, from the players themselves. I sort of want to get first things first. I feel like it can't at all come from the fan base, like I've kind of seen throughout sort of the Twitter sphere and everything, because at least I want to start with this, Mia. As Spurs fans, we've been desperate for trophies for like a pretty long time. So for us to, sort of have this kind of lackadaisical sort of attitude about, when we're falling out of cup competitions or when we're losing these games, I think is a bit far fetched. In fact, Spurs fans would almost do anything to win a trophy in most scenarios. They would tolerate, practically breaking an arm, it feels like, in order to get a trophy over the line. So for us to be responsible for this mentality, I don't think that's the case. And I actually would, for the most part, rule us out really in that sort of kind of feeling that, maybe we are sort of, contributing to this, lack of pressure that he's sort of, talking about. I feel like, yes, we can be forgiving, Mia, as a fan base. We're not maybe as annoyingly toxic all the time, at least I hope, as maybe other fan bases might be when they do kind of, fail to meet expectations. But still, like, I mean, I just want to start first with that. This sort of lack of pressure that he's talking about, I don't think it's coming from the fan base, right?
No, I don't think it is at all. And the fact that he wasn't specific about that a bit upsets me because I feel like he could
Hmm.
have been a little bit more specific and to sort of but band us in a way with that because he hasn't excluded us. I feel like was a bit out of order, and I felt like I say, he could have been a little bit more. If he
Right.
well, I think he should be talking about it at all. I think he should keep my club's name out of his mouth. But
Mm.
he didn't need to say that. But I think respectfully, if he's going to do it, he could have done it in another way, especially when it comes towards the fans, because he knows how we feel and he must gauge that. And but like I
Right.
say, not specify him. I think he's just upsetting fans, like he's upsetting
Hmm.
us as fans to try and say that we're sort of banded in with that, which I,
I
I
think you're
don't
right.
appreciate.
I felt like a bit. I think you're spot on because I felt a bit looped in when he sort of said that lack of pressure, or somehow it did feel like, are you kind of alluding to the fan base here, like Harry? Like, who are you really alluding to here? And I kind of agree with what you're saying there. I do feel like if you were to say where this sort of lack of pressure or this, lack of, real feeling of, competitiveness that he's kind of speaking about, it obviously does come first, from the board. It comes from the top. They are responsible for providing, right, a quality enough squad that is capable of winning trophies. And times past, I think, Mia, we've seen, us sort of decide between, do we want to win this Man United game in the Premier League on the weekend and then try to get away with a weaker squad in the cup competition midweek? And we've seen us, sort of fall victim to that and end up sort of, not getting over the line because ultimately the squad really wasn't deep enough or strong enough to be able to sort of kind of switch players in and out to sort of really balance things. Whereas you see other squads, other teams around the league, they can sort of make those changes and those sort of rotations without having that much of a dip in quality. It does feel like. So I do feel like the board and the ownership absolutely have a huge influence on what he's talking about. And also, too, I do feel like the board and the ownership have a bit of influence on sort of the general hunger and the general sort of determination around the place. You see certain ownerships that come into their clubs and immediately, you see sort of the vibe around the team sort of changes. I would say that with Newcastle, and I would say that with Chelsea. Chelsea for the worse, and kind of with Newcastle, you could say in a way for the better, despite, the resources, that they have. They still seem to have like a much different sort of mentality about the place than maybe the previous ownership did. And then in the case of Chelsea, it feels like the ownership came in with just a different mentality entirely, and it's actually been for the worse. So the ownership, in my opinion, does have some sort of responsibility of what Harry Kane's talking about. But next, I think we'll, speak about the players, because this is where I think, it's partially their fault that they're not showing up in these games. And when he's saying, Mia, that, oh, we don't really feel the pressure when we lose a few games in a row, can't the players put pressure on themselves? This is where I feel like Harry's starting to lean into slight hypocrisy here, because it's like, well, you're also responsible for that feeling that you're talking about. If you're losing a few games after another, surely, you should just accept that you're not the ones that are showing up here, and you got to do something about that.
Yeah, absolutely. When they cross that white line, Jack, that's down to them, right? It's their responsibility. And once they cross it back again and they've lost that game, that pressure should be amongst them than their peers. And he was one of the old guard, remember? So really, he should be one of the louder voices to say, this isn't good enough, what's going on? He should be showing his discontent and also encouraging, making sure that players aren't thinking that this is okay and acceptable, because you're part of that, you are part of that, and you've been part of it when we have been in semi-finals and finals. Harry Kane, you have been there when we haven't won those. So absolutely, I feel like that he is trying to sort of point the finger and not really take any of the responsibility for it, which I'm not a fan of at all. He could have worded it differently, Jack. He could have, like I say, he could have put it in a slightly different
clearer
way
manner.
and a clearer and a little bit, I feel like a little bit different. And again, I just felt like it's like a sort of pointing finger exercise without thinking about the fact that he's been part of it, and he's also had managers that have been we've had Jose and Conte. You're telling me they're not managers that put pressure on anybody?
Good point. Good point.
That's ridiculous to say that wouldn't have happened. So
he even complained, or not him specifically, but players even complained about that sort of attitude from sort of, the managers in the past, that they're relentless, they're always getting in our faces whenever things go wrong, sort of thing. And maybe they did go about it, in a wrong way from time to time, but still, right, to say that pressure was sort of missing entirely. Again, I agree with you. You need to be a bit clearer there. And I also feel like when he's saying that, we would lose a couple of games, but just didn't really feel like, you had that sort of, pressure on you. It's like, well, if you're failing to show up and you're failing and, to win, and you're failing to get over the line, and you're just accepting it as players, that there's not a lot of pressure coming. I mean, surely you guys could do something about that. Like, you guys could put pressure on yourselves. You guys could, rally around each other and say, hey, this isn't acceptable. We need to try to turn this, around here. It's not like on the fans or completely on, the board themselves. I think the board could do better about, maybe trying to change the general culture around the club, but it's still up to those guys crossing that white line to do the job. And if they're not doing it, and then if they fail and they're just sort of like, oh, well, I guess we failed this time, we'll just try again next year. I mean, come on, like, that's not, you're absolutely, I think, part of the problem, or at least the players do have to share some responsibility, for that. Completely.
Yeah. As well, I think that actually what Postecoglou was really good. And what he said was that everybody wants to come in and win something, right? But it's not just about that. There's a mentality as people that you have to have, like as a person, to take on that like responsibility. And he said it's everybody's responsibility, right? It isn't just his, it isn't just the players, it's a collective. You have stuff as a collective, so you have to hold each other accountable. And I think that's what he was alluding to, is that you've got to hold each other accountable, and it isn't just down to one person or one factor, because you all want to win, and that's why you're in an elite sport, because you want to win. But that responsibility of doing it when there's pressure or whatever it is down to you as well as a player. So you have to have that sort of mentality where you can take the pressure upon yourself, and also understand that you've got to do your part in it. It isn't just a one man thing, it's a group, it's a collective. You
Spot
have
on.
to be a collective. And that's why I love Anne so much, because he's always about the collective.
Spot on. Let's get on to some more quotes here. He said, "That's part and parcel of being at one of the biggest clubs in the world. I'm enjoying feeling those different emotions. And that's part of the reason that I wanted to go." And I feel like if he feels like the mentality that he's sort of alluding to, right? That lack of pressure, that lack of, willing to turn things around. If he felt like that wasn't going away at Spurs at this stage in his career, Mia, I can kind of understand why he would want to try something else. He wants to go to a new environment where he does feel that pressure, where he does feel that mentality. But as we just spoke about, right, to say that he's not completely, or to say that he's completely absent or, unresponsible for that sort of mentality that was at Spurs, that's where I do get rubbed off a little, the wrong way. I'm actually accepting that he wants to go to a place that might have, right, a stronger, more winning type, culture and mentality. It's, at his stage in his career, he should go after that, if you were in his shoes. But still, like, to say as if like you didn't contribute in any way to this sort of bad culture or this sort of bad, maybe winning, mentality at Spurs. And not saying he's one of the bad actors or one of the biggest contributors to it, but, everybody takes some responsibility of it. And that's where I kind of a little bit rubbed off, the wrong way here with Kane. But still, I feel like he's had exceptional season after exceptional season, and you have to give him a lot of credit for that. But you do look at sometimes his productivity, right, in those cup competitions, and he hasn't nearly been as impressive as he has been in the season, in the actual Premier League, than he has been in some of these cup competitions and trying to get things over the line here. So there's also that I must bring up, that I feel like Kane, yeah, he's been exceptional season after season, but that's also, I think, in the Premier League, right? And trying to get us to finish as high in the table as possible. He should actually probably bear really not that much responsibility for where we really finish in the league, because he's always done, an exceptional job in putting good numbers in the league. But when it comes to the cup competitions, Mia, I think Kane has, found times where he just went a bit missing, maybe didn't really take any real sort of foothold, in the game, and could have done more. And, it feels like, yeah, he didn't get as many opportunities as he would have liked, but he didn't exactly always take advantage of the ones that were given to him either.
No, he didn't. And Joe, what I will say is that all along, I was one of these people who said he would want to go to a big club. And Bayern are a big club. I've got absolutely no doubt they are a big, big club. And I do understand him fully wanting to go. And I said that again all along. I was always one of the advocates for it who said, listen, I think he will go because I believe he wants to do that. And he'll want to feel different emotion. It is a very different place. New people, it's very, very different. And I completely understand
Yeah.
why he wanted to do that. So it wasn't like I was somebody who didn't think that would happen, that his reasoning for it happening. But like I say again, I just feel like these digs are just unnecessary. When he's asked questions, I feel like the whole, like, bringing up Tottenham into the same sentence and saying
Uh-huh.
a world class um, um, club, or that's a world,
Yeah.
like that's a winner's mentality. It's just like, yeah, we know, like it's just those little dicks, and you're just a bit
Yeah.
like, you were part of that too. That fact that we didn't win, you were part of that non-winning
You were part
mentality
of that
too.
history. Yeah.
So
You
you
were
were
part of
part of
that
that
history.
history too. It is everybody. And I've always said that, Jack, and people gave me pelters when I'd say, listen, that team when we lost, he was part of it. So was he part of the losers crew that didn't win us a trophy? Yes, he was. Of course he was. It's the
Mm.
whole team,
And
but he was also part of that team. And people didn't obviously appreciate that. But my point was is that he also has to have his part of his responsibility in that. And it just
mm,
feels like he's gone to Bayern, gone, I'm rubbing my hands of any of the history of Tottenham. I'm not part of that no more. I don't want to know about any of that anymore. So I'm not even going to
yeah.
be spoken about in that kind of way. I don't want to be spoken
Yeah.
about in that way. And I get it, because he wants to become the best. And obviously, I understand that. But I feel like, again, he really could have done it without bringing Tottenham's name into his mouth and making us feel you're going over now to Bayern and keep having little digs at
Yeah.
us. Joe,
He was
like, just
he
not
was also,
necessary.
though, Mia, he was part of that leadership group that I've actually kind of called out before, that involved Hugo, right?
Yep,
Hugo Lloris, it involved Dyer, and he was part of it, right? And it felt
he
like
was.
he I've always said with Kane, I didn't actually find him to be the greatest or most inspiring of leaders, because he more leads by example, and just him, his own productivity, just him being able to, step up, when you need him in the big moments. But that's sort of like what he is, but he's not much more than that when it comes to his leadership capabilities. He doesn't come across as the guy that's really great at motivating others, that's, good at sort of getting other people into the game onto that same sort of mentality as him, because he does a great job, in my opinion, at going in with the right mentality. But he didn't seem, always to be the best at, inspiring others and motivating others as other captains might, across, sort of the league or in other sort of teams and examples. So this is what I sort of mean. It's like he's going into Bayern and he's going to carry with him that sort of leadership of leading by example, but he's actually going into Bayern, I think, with not much experience, I think, in actually motivating others and like being able to, help others sort of kind of get together. And I think that's where he, again, sort of has to take some responsibility for when Spurs haven't really gotten over the line, is even when he had a good game, you still have to be, as a captain, as a leader, capable of inspiring your other teammates to sort of get on the same level with you. And I don't think Kane has actually done that, in a few situations. And he's not even been my ideal captain or my ideal candidate. I've, questioned Lloris and I've questioned Kane as a captain at times before. So I feel like he was a part of that leadership group that, in my opinion, I think failed actually to help the whole squad and help the whole team go into these big cup competitions and these big, matches with the right mentality. And I feel like, yes, Harry Kane is by no means perfect, but you still have to feel like, he could have done maybe a bit better in sort of that area if you were to criticize him, of just sort of motivating, inspiring, and sort of helping his teammates in getting over the line, even if they weren't as talented as sort of the opposition they came up against. It just did feel like, Mia, sometimes we came out a little flat, came out kind of a little nervous. And Kane, maybe wasn't as nervous or wasn't as flat as the others, but he could have helped and, them, getting out of that funk, right? It felt like he would just sort of stick to himself or kind of, stick to himself, I think, in these moments. And I feel like he could have done a better job in that regard, even when he was having a good game. And I know that's being, you could say, a stickler, being really harsh. I don't really care. I think that's, if he's going to make these little digs, this is all part of, the response that I think we're allowed to have, is like, well, maybe you could have done a bit better at sort of motivating a Sissoko or motivating, other players around you to perform better.
Well, yeah, if you're going to want to be put in that elite category, Jack, you've got to be judged on that elite category, right?
Correct.
So for me, if you're going to want to put yourself in that, then you're going to have to understand you're going to get criticism for things like not turning up in those big games. I'm sorry, but you are. And if you class yourself as a leader, then you're going to have to obviously motivate and behave like a leader and maybe not just lead by example. And I always felt like Kane never really had that X factor. I can't explain it. I can't tell you exactly what that is. But I see like somebody like Gareth Bale. When we were rubbish, we were pants. But Gareth Bale just took it upon himself to just carry Tottenham, like literally carry us on his back. Where Kane never really felt like he ever did that in those important moments, like a final. He never took it upon. It is the whole team as a collective, do not get me wrong. But he never really did that. So I always felt like Kane was missing a little bit of that. And that goes along with being a captain, a leader. I feel like you have to have this, like, so all different people are different in the way that they lead, but he never really had that X factor to lead, if that makes sense. I never felt like he really had it.
Well, that's why I'm curious, because when I look at some of his numbers, right, you look at how he performed in the league versus how he's done in cup competitions, it is quite stark, right, the difference between the two. So in my opinion, at least, I start to think, is he going into these cup competitions with maybe a different mentality, a bit of nerves, maybe slightly questioning, his moves a bit more, what passes he makes, where his movement is, right? He might not be going into these cup competitions with the right sort of elite winners mentality or leadership mentality. And then that sort of affected other players, because Kane was seen as a guy that they looked up to, right? That was the guy that they depended on, to say the right things and, be the right person. And this is where I kind of distinguish between, I think Kane always led by example, where he would score a goal, or he would, play that right pass that you needed him to. His first touch would always be great. But then it's like, did he really, though, do enough to try to inspire his teammates to get to that same level, because you need to get there as a team. You can't carry your whole team through these cup matches. You need the whole team to be on that same level, to be on that same bar. And I'm just like, maybe he didn't do that as much in the cup competitions as he did in the league. It felt like in the league, he was sort of a different sort of beast of himself. He was impressive at being able to sort of drag us through games, especially when it would be against Man City, right? It just turns into a different player in itself. But then when it came against, maybe a Man City in a cup competition, maybe a bit of a different story, right? In a different situation. Let's go on to sort of his other quotes here. And he said, when we get back, I think he means Bayern here, we start the Champions League campaign, which they expect to win and they expect to win. So you're going into those games with maybe a different feeling to what I've had in the past. I don't really blame him for, sort of feeling this one. Champions League is, right, Bayern's competition, and they sort of actually have more pressure on sort of, themselves than almost any other team, I think, other than like a Real Madrid, probably, to win, the Champions League. So I can actually understand that he feels a huge difference in the pressure when it comes to that competition in particular. And us as Spurs fans too, like, I'll be honest, like, I've been, pretty happy just to be in the Champions League, like, just in general. So I'm not going to get too much on his case in this one. And I feel like even to Mia, like when we made the final with Pochettino and the final had even ended, I was still in delirium that we had even made the final in the first place. And so that's just sort of does speak to, right? Like, this is where I'm not saying again that the fans are in any way to blame, but like Champions League, it is a bit different for Bayern than it is a bit different for Spurs. I can get with that. I can understand that one.
Like I just said, really, Bayern, like, they're a massive club and they go into the Champions League, one of the top, like, however many, 4 to win it, right? Every time, surely. So it is a big competition. They're always up there in the semi-finals, finals. They've been there. So for me, of course, I do get that completely.
Yeah. And then he also went on to say, as a competitor, when the boys are playing in the Champions League and I'm just sitting at home watching it, I would be lying if I said there wasn't a part of me that hurt. And I feel like this is what I was talking about earlier. Like, when it comes to the actual league, Mia, I think we had our discussion, right? In the cup competitions, I think he has been a different Harry Kane and he bears responsibility for that. But there have been some seasons where he did drag us, through the league, and he did drag us, to as almost high of a position as I felt like he could. And that's where I feel like when he did see us not make it to the Champions League and he did see us not reach, those sort of levels, and I could see why he would be sitting there a bit jealous. Like, it kind of goes on to say here, I think he said, of course I want them to do well, as but a part of me wants to have those experiences too. I'm not sure jealous is the right word, but with other players in the team having done that, it does motivate me to go on and try to push myself towards some of those trophies that the guys have got. So when he did put in those like 20 plus goal, 10 plus assist seasons, and we only finished in the Europa League, I do feel like I felt bad for him, and I could see why he would have his head a bit turned in these moments, Mia, because he's feeling like I should be in that competition. Harry Maguire is playing in the Champions League. Why am I not playing in the Champions League? Kind of thing. So I could see why he was in this sort of headspace, because in the league, at least in the Premier League, he did have some pretty spectacular seasons where we did fall short, and I don't know how much more he could have done. Whereas when it comes to the cup competitions, I would say it's actually a very different story when it comes to trophies, if you get what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. No, of course. Like, again, I understand it because I've always said elite mentality is somebody who does want to be playing in those big competitions and winning those big trophies. And again, I said that about Kane. I said that because I had an argument before about it, about League Cup versus him winning the Bundesliga. And I was like, listen, trust me, the Bundesliga is a big trophy. Winning a League Cup isn't going to fulfill his feeling of winning a big trophy. And it's the same with the Champions League. I feel like the Champions League is a big trophy and he's going to be up there competing with it pretty much every single year that he plays there. That is what an elite player would want to do. That is obviously completely understandable. And that's where I set standards, I suppose. Like, my standards aren't really that far of what Harry Kane thought. Like, for him, in his mind, and people said, you don't know what Harry Kane's thinking, you don't know. But it turns out I was correct, because I know if you're an elite player, that's what you want to do, because nobody goes into anything thinking, Do you know what? Champions League? Nah, ain't for me. Of course not. You want to be hearing that music. We all love the Champions
Yeah.
League like music. It gives you that special feeling. And if you're competing, like really are competitive in it every year, that's going to be a nice, good feeling for him, right? He wants to be
Then
competing and possibly winning it, you know?
that seems to be your sort of, I don't want to summarize so quickly all of your points. That seems to be your big crux, right? Or your big takeaway is that he made some unnecessary digs and some unnecessary comparisons
Yeah,
to Spurs. But some of the things he just speaks about, like, this is a different environment. This is a different pressure that I haven't had, before, in and around just the world. And the expectations, are crazy different. You're like, I don't necessarily blame him for saying that, because it is Bayern Munich. It is a crazy, massive club with huge expectations and a huge history. But it's like, you're also thinking, don't also absolve, or what is it, don't exempt yourself from all the times in the past where Spurs didn't get over the line. So I can see why, if I were to summarize what you're kind of saying, it's like some of the things he's saying aren't even that far out of line or even that crazy to think about if you're a motivated, very elite player. But then some of the digs, maybe not necessary, right?
yeah. It's a bit like, if we're going to compare it to anything, Jack, it's a bit like if you're in a relationship and you know that the relationship isn't working and you're looking to think to yourself, Joe, what, I can do better than this relationship because it's just, they're not treating me right. This isn't what I want anymore. But you don't go around then talking bad about your ex. Like, there's just no need for it. When you're
It's
with
not a
your new,
mature thing to do.
you're not
Yeah.
you're not a new with the new person that you're with. You don't need to badmouth your ex all the time. Just be happy that you moved on from that relationship. It's
Mm,
done. You wasn't happy. You wanted something better, something different. That's all good, and I completely appreciate that. However, don't be talking about your ex all the time because it just doesn't make you look like a very nice person. It makes you look
mm,
a bit petty in a
mm.
way.
Mm. And he also said just the experiences of having title runs and cup runs and hopefully a Champions League run will only add, and hopefully, to handling the pressure, or handling the pressure in certain situations if we are going to win anything with England, and we are going to have to deal with that. Me being captain, I want to put myself in that position as much as possible. And again, I can sort of understand this, where probably, I don't know if the quotes are really being taken that much out of context, because like I said, I don't know if he needed to make these comparisons to Spurs, felt a bit unnecessary. But all these sort of questions and comments, Mia, they all seem to be in some way right under the umbrella of sort of, right, he's on England duty right now, and they're asking him about getting over the line, winning trophies with England. And he's basically trying to say, I think, and maybe did it poorly, to be honest, I'm at this new club, Bayern. They have such high expectations. There's so much pressure to win things. I think that's really going to help me in getting things over the line with England as well, because I haven't had this sort of type of pressure maybe in the past, or whatever. But he just didn't go about it the right way, I think. But that's really what the point I think he was trying to say. Is just sort of
Yeah.
like, now that I'm at Bayern, I can actually take what I'm learning at Bayern over to the England team, and I could see why he would say that. That's actually logical, sort of thing to bring up. But like we're sort of saying here, and you and I are agreeing with each other, just kind of, if that was his intention, he didn't use the right words, or he didn't go about it the right way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
again, it's just really poorly worded and thought out. Like when you're thinking out something to say or an answer,
Because
like
I
these
think this is
guys,
what he really wanted to say. I think this quote, I think this is what he really wanted to say, but he said it later instead of saying it first.
yeah,
Sort of
the
thing.
thing is, these guys are media trained, so they should have somewhat of an idea of what to say. But yeah, again, he could have just put it in such a different kind of way to make it not sound so harsh. Is the whole thing just sounds a really harsh way of going about saying what he could have just said was, guess what? I'm at a new club. This is a completely different pressure because they are Bayern Munich and they're used to winning stuff, which is cool, which is fine. We understand. And now that's also given me an opportunity to learn how to feel under that pressure and use that when I am being a captain at England. That's all
Mm,
you have. That's, do you know what I mean? That's not
yeah.
any sort of digs at your ex, right? At your ex team. And I'll tell you who did that perfectly again is Ange. When they asked him about the Scottish League, he never put down the Scottish League or Celtic
Good point.
once. He only ever said, listen, this is a new challenge. Yes, I've got more opportunity because I've got different availability for, you know, players, etc. And it is different. But is it any better? No. Every single time I go to a club, it's a challenge for me. So he never once put Scotland down, never once put Celtic down. And I feel like that's what Kane could have easily done. He could have done it. Like the way that Postecoglou did that was classy. It was very, very classy. The way he handled that question particularly, I was like, yes, I love this guy, because you can tell he's got that element of class. Where I feel like that Kane didn't really quite catch that whole classy vibe when he answered the questions. He could have sort of done it a little bit better.
And Ange has always, I think, from what we can tell, been a better speaker, better orator, just better in, you know, kind of at communicating his message than I think Kane has been. And this is where I kind of want to give Kane the benefit of the doubt, where I do feel like, yeah, I kind of said he's a bit of a hypocrite with some of the things he said, you know, in these quotes. I just also don't want to sort of take it too much out of context where he's really digging out Spurs like some sort of people have made it out to be. I think he's made, some unnecessary comparisons and digs, but I don't think he did it with any sort of negative malice or anything in mind. I think what he was trying to say was, like in that last quote there, that England haven't exactly, won the trophies. We're trying to get over the line here. I'm playing for this new club. We're expected to win the Champions League this year. We're expected to win the cups. We're expected to win the title. And that actually is helping me right now and maybe trying to help my England teammates, because he said, as a captain, I need to have this sort of mentality if we're expected to get over the line with England. And so if that's what he was really trying to say, I feel like, yeah, you're absolutely spot on, Harry. I mean, going to a Bayern Munich definitely would help you in that sort of mentality change that you need. And then right? But still, like, he's acting like he couldn't have been working. Like, he needs work on this. Like, he's going to Bayern Munich so that he can work on this sort of element of his mentality, because it wasn't, really there at Spurs. He was great at being a leader by example, but he wasn't as great at, sort of motivating others, I think. And so that's where I just feel like a lot of what he was trying to say, I think, are the right things to try to say, but he just didn't exactly go about it, I think, in these sort of quotes. And then he ends up, getting a a huge response and reaction, and probably an over the top sort of one from myself. But I think Mia was absolutely speaking some sense, though, to be fair. And she's done her own video too, I imagine, on the Harry Kane situation, or at least has spoken about it. Mia, thank you for helping me out today. And any final words on the situation? And also, please give your own channel a plug, please.
My final words are, yes, I think he went about it in a very clumsy way. And, like, of course, I think Harry will always think about Tottenham, because that's where he spent most of his time, right? Obviously, that's been his past. But Harry, just leave it in the past. Don't start clumsily trying to refer to Tottenham. It just makes things a little bit easier, because now you've gone, I'm like a bit like Harry who, we're getting on with our thing. We're playing with Ange, I'm
stay out of my news feed.
Yeah, it's just like, it'd be nice. I understand you get asked these questions, but maybe do it a teeny little bit better next time. But yeah, if you can go over and subscribe to Spurs Between the Lines, I would appreciate it. I've done a video about a little bit about this and a bit about the QT Romero injury as well, which is interesting to see if that is fake news or not. A bit interesting, that one. But yeah, and I've also done a series. I did the first one with my brother. I did the video about the defence, and tomorrow I've got one coming out of Ashmatic about the midfield, and then I'm going to be doing one with lovely Jack and Dave about the attack. So yeah, it's like a little mini series I decided to do while we're on the international break, and we haven't really got too much to talk about, to be honest.
Well, we found a way to still fill up 30 minutes of time here, Mia, which is a credit to us, and also credit to Harry Kane for making such a howler of, the press conference, for sure. But please, everybody, smash that like button, and feel free in the comments to let us know if you disagree, with this our take on it, or let us know if you agree. Let us know if there's maybe something we might have missed, maybe an angle on it, that should have been brought up. But everybody, really do appreciate your support for the channel throughout this international break. Let's keep on pushing, and Ange Ball will be back soon. Come on, you Spurs. And in the big Ange we trust.
Ange we trust. We never stop.
We never stop.